Hey guys, Bartel's Bookshelf here with sort of an early Christmas video. So Arron decided that rather than getting me a gift card or something from something expensive from Folio Society, he said, "All right, you know what? I'm going to take you to half price. You can fill up a basket with as much as you want, and I'll buy it for you." And he did. And so now I have a huge vintage science fiction book haul, some newer stuff, but it's all sci-fi. These are all of the books. And this is the man who paid for them. Because that's what I've been in the mood for lately. So I've got this huge haul of 25 sci-fi novels. So I'm just going to go through and talk about them a little bit. First of all, I'm starting off with some series that I got. I have books 2, 3, and 5 of the Hitchhiker's Guide series. This is book 2, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. Book 3, Life, the Universe, and Everything, and Book 4, So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. I wanted to get all 5 of them, but they didn't have Mostly Harmless, unfortunately. I used to have this big hardcover anthology of the Hitchhiker's Guide books, but I sold it for some reason. But I kind of like the mass market paperbacks more anyway. Of course, I've read the first book. It's a classic, and I've read the second one, but I don't think I've read the rest. But I've seen the BBC miniseries. I've seen the film. I haven't listened to the original radio shows, but my point is, I'm a big fan of Hitchhiker's Guide. My friend Laura has been wanting to get into it recently. She actually even bought a similar, really nice omnibus edition of it. So I figured, I'll get them all while I can, and maybe we can buddy read them together. I'm really excited she's getting into that stuff. So yeah, looking forward to that. No, I mean, not much else to say. You all know Hitchhiker's Guide, or most of you do, I would hope. British humor, surreal, science fiction, very dry, hilarious, great. I used to be subscribed to The Great Courses, and they have one about the history of science fiction literature, which I downloaded ages ago. And because I've been getting back into sci-fi recently, I decided to rewatch the whole thing. And the presenter Gary K. Wolfe is great. If you're interested, I'll link it in the description. It's a great series of lectures, very comprehensive. But in one of them, he talks about this author, Gregory Benford, who wrote this series called the Galactic Center series. And at half price, they just so happen to have almost all of the books, except for the last one. But this is the first one. This is In the Ocean of Night. Book 2 is Across the Sea of Suns. Book 3 is Great Sky River. And Book 4 is Tides of Light. Now, I have no idea how to summarize these because it's a very complex series, at least based on how he said it, so I'll just read the back of the first book. 2019. NASA astronaut Nigel Walmsley is sent on a mission to intercept a rogue asteroid on a collision course with Earth. Ordered to destroy the comet, he instead discovers that it is actually the shell of a derelict space probe, a wreck with just enough power to emit a single electronic signal. 2034. Then a reply is heard. Searching for the source of this signal that comes from outside the solar system, Nigel discovers the existence of a sentient ship. When the new vessel begins to communicate directly with him, the astronaut learns of the horrors that await humanity. For the ship was created by an alien race that has spent billions and billions of years searching for intelligent life to annihilate it. So yeah, I've heard this is a very big, complex series. Huge sort of sweeping implications, sort of universe-spanning stuff, millennia-spanning stuff, at least as far as I understand it. It sounds wild and crazy and really, really interesting, so I'm looking forward to getting into these eventually. Next, I just have a motley of just mostly vintage sci-fi here. I have 2 by Harry Harrison here. I have Make Room, and Bill the Galactic Hero. So Make Room is a very famous novel of overpopulation that was published in 1966, and this was actually the basis, very loose basis, for the movie Soylent Green. I've never read the book, but I've heard it's very different from the movie, and I've heard a lot of great things about Harry Harrison. So it says, the time, Monday, August 9th, 1999. The place, New York City. As in any other August, it's hot in New York City, but even worse than ever because of all the people. The population now numbers 35 million. It is a New York City where each person is rationed to 1 quart of water a day, the staple food is seaweed crackers, and thousands of people live in the streets. Set against this background, which seems both unimaginable and yet prophetically possible, the bizarre death of a man brings together 3 people from different walks of life in a hauntingly unusual adventure story of the future. So yeah, I heard a lot of good things. I've got some more Harry Harrison I need to get to. I've got an omnibus edition of the first three Stainless Steel Rat books, which are supposed to be really great, so I look forward to those. Bill the Galactic Hero is kind of in a similar vein to something like the Stainless Steel Rat, where it's meant to be kind of satirical and comedic, sort of almost like a parody of like like old pulp space operas. On the good ship Christine Keeler, he was just plain Bill, enrolled in a correspondence course for a career as technical fertilizer operator down on the farm, until a recruiting robot turned his head with visions of bright nebula lights, snappy red uniforms, and a cup of deep space knockout drops. And Bill suddenly found himself aboard the Empire's spaceship Christine Keeler, fighting the Empire's war against the lizard-like Chingers. But an act of accidental heroism won him the Purple Dart and an all-expenses-paid trip to fabulous Helior, the aluminum-plated Sin City of the Empire, and that's when Bill's adventures really began. So yeah, sounds really silly, a lot of fun. I've really been craving a lot of that kind of classic space opera stuff, but this stuff sounds like a little bit more palatable because it's sort of a satire and kind of having fun with it, so look forward to that. Speaking of classic space opera, I have The Skylark of Space by E. Doc Smith. This is, I believe, one of the first space opera novels written from, I believe, 1915 to like 1924 or 1921, somewhere around there, but it wasn't published until 1928. E. Smith is also well known for his Lensman series, which is another classic space opera. That was the one that I really wanted, that I was really looking for. They didn't have it at half price, unfortunately, but I did find this. I was really happy to find it. So it says, it started on Earth. Scientist Richard Seaton had discovered the secret of complete release of ultimate energy, the key to spaceflight. The powerful, unscrupulous Duquesne, backed by a great industrial combine, tried murder and theft to gain the secret. Duquesne struck, and it ended in space. Seaton, Duquesne, and 3 others, 2 of them women, were marooned countless light years from Earth, with only one chance in a million of getting back. In this action classic, Doc Smith spins a tense tale of intrigue, scientific discovery, and galactic exploration. So as I said, I've been in the mood for sort of like classic space opera, and this is kind of the one. This is like kind of generally considered to be the one that started that whole subgenre. So I've never read any E. Smith before either, so this should be interesting. I very much look forward to seeing what that's like. So another classic here. This is The Star Is My Destination by Alfred Bester. Really, I was looking for The Demolished Man, which they didn't have, unfortunately, but this was the other one that I really wanted to read. This is a sci-fi retelling of The Count of Monte Cristo, and those who've watched my channel for a while know, like, that's one of my favorite books of all time. It's about a guy named Gully Foyle, who's utterly alone when first met, marooned in deep space, his chances of survival near zero. Gully has only begun his violent odyssey. So, typical, Count of Monte Cristo, but, with this, like, sci-fi premise. I believe this was originally going to be the basis for the Gonkutsuo Monte Cristo anime, but they couldn't get the rights or something like that, so they kind of made up their own sci-fi thing. But this is basically sort of the antecedent to that, so I'm really, really looking forward to reading that. Very excited about that. Another classic here, another early Hugo Award winner. This isn't the first Hugo Award winner. Actually, The Demolished Man was the first Hugo Award winner, but this is another very early one. This is The Big Time by Fritz Lieber. So this, as far as I understand it, this is a sort of a time travel story. It's about this time war that's being fought between all these different factions, and every time each faction kind of wins or loses a battle, that affects time differently. So it's about how kind of the time stream in the world sort of changes around this big time war, essentially. It sounds really wild and crazy. A lot of fun. I've read some Fritz Lieber before. Fafford and the Grey Mouser. I've read some of those stories, and those are great. So hoping that's good too. Yet another classic here. So this is Venus Plus X by Theodore Sturgeon. As I mentioned previously, I had read E Pluribus Unicorn, which I really loved. I've got a copy of Sturgeon's More Than Human. And this was he didn't write many novels, but this was his other major one. The lead-on had made a world without war, without fear, a world in which each individual was free to love, to create, to explore. The lead-on, a gentle and kindly new race, made their 20th century guest, Charlie Johns, welcome to their paradise. Charlie thought he was in heaven, but then he found out just where and when he was, and Eden turned into a nightmare. So yeah, don't know a whole lot about it, just know that it's one of Sturgeon's major works. Been wanting to read it. I believe there's a lot of sort of like bisexuality and like gender fluidity in this book, so that should be interesting. So yeah, look forward to that. I have 2 H.G. Wells novels here. You can probably guess what they are. But I'm sad to say I've never actually read these. This is The War of the Worlds, of course. classic alien invasion story, pretty much the blueprint for every alien invasion story ever written. But I've never read it, I'm sorry to say. Of course, I've seen the films and everything, and I know the broad sort of strokes of the story, but I've never actually read the original piece. And, it's time to change that. I've been exploring all these vintage sci-fi books. I've been watching all these lectures about the history of science fiction. So I thought it would be fun to, kind of go back and see where it all started. And on that note, the other one I have is The Time Machine, which I have read this one, or at least most of this one, but that was in like 7th grade or 8th grade. I don't remember a whole lot about it. If War of the Worlds was the kind of prototypical alien invasion story, this is the prototypical time travel story, so the fact that I haven't read this, or at least read the whole thing from what I remember, is also a travesty, so I really need to rectify that. And part of the reason that I grabbed The Time Machine was because I wanted to read this. This is The Time Ships by Stephen Baxter. He's another author similar to Gregory Benford, who's written a lot of sort of way out, sort of space opera-y kind of stuff. But this is actually a sequel to The Time Machine, from a very like hard SF point of view. It's supposed to be very, very, very wild, very. I mean, it says an astonishing quantum voyage to the far future. It's supposed to be really wild, really out there, really imaginative. Sounds like a lot of fun, but I wanted to read the original book, just so I could have the context going into this. So, some more random vintage reads here, or like near vintage. This one isn't really vintage unless you consider 2000 vintage, but I was born in 1992, so I don't consider that vintage. God, but this is The Moreau Factor by Jack L. Chalker. I've talked about Jack Chalker before. He was the author of the Well World series and the Dancing Gods series. I've read the first 2 of the Dancing Gods books so far, and they're a lot of fun. And this sounds really interesting. It's sort of it's about a reporter who receives a mysterious package filled with a computer disk and strange samples of DNA. So it's sort of inspired by Island of Dr. Moreau, another H.G. Wells classic. Man, H.G. Wells wrote a lot of those, didn't he? But yeah, so it sounds interesting. I was mostly interested in it because I like Chalker's writing, and he tends to write a lot of stories that involve sort of like physical transformation and stuff like that, and I enjoy those kinds of things, so I don't know, sounded interesting. We'll see how that is. And now I got a lot of vintage stuff here. First I have Bring the Jubilee by Ward Moore. This is a classic alternate history novel about the South winning the Civil War, similar to the Harry Turtledove book I read earlier, How Few Remain, but this was kind of the first one of its kind. Not the first alternate history story, but this was kind of like one of the forefathers. Yeah, 1955, so this is a very early alternate history story, very influential. I know Ollie read it recently and enjoyed it, so definitely look forward to that. Got some Samuel R. Delany here, The Jewels of Aptor. Samuel R. Delany obviously is a classic sci-fi author. He wrote stuff like Babel 17, Dahlgren, a bunch of short stories. This is one of his earlier novels, not from 1962, although this is it says it's a revised and enlarged version. I'm not sure what that means, but that'll be interesting to see. I don't even really know much about it. I honestly have no idea what it's about, but I've been into vintage sci-fi. I haven't read much Samuel R. Delany. I've read a couple short stories here and there, but I haven't read any of his novels, and this was on my list, so I wanted to grab it. This is Space Viking by H. Beam Piper. They didn't have Little Fuzzy, which was what I really wanted to read, but this was also on my list as well. I mean, and you can guess why. That cover art's fucking awesome. In fact, who did that? That's got to be Michael Whelan, right? It is. It's Michael Whelan. I knew it. So yeah, as soon as I saw that cover art, I knew I had to grab it. I actually saw this on a list of vintage novels. I don't remember what the premise of the list was, but it was an old Tor list that had a lot of vintage stuff on it. And as soon as I saw that title and that cover art, I was like, damn, I gotta read that. A galaxy-wide war had destroyed the old Federation, leaving every surviving world on its own, and at the mercy of the Space Vikings. Lucas Trask was one of these renegades, a warrior with a ship and a crew terrorizing 1,000 worlds. But Trask was more than just a raider. He was a man with an old score to settle and a very special mission to fulfill. So yeah, sounds like a lot of fun. Little Fuzzy, I know, was an early Hugo Award winner. Wanted to read that, couldn't find it, unfortunately, but this looks crazy fun, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to all of these, obviously, or I wouldn't have bought them, but next I have some Alan Dean Foster. This is For Love of Mother Knot. This is part of the Flinks of the Commonwealth series. They called him Flinks. He was just a freckle-faced, red-headed kid with green eyes and a strangely compelling stare when Mother Mastiff first saw him on the auctioneer's block. 100 credits, and he was hers. For years, the old woman was his only family. She loved him, fed him, taught him everything she knew, even let him keep the deadly flying snake he called Pip. Then Mother Mastiff mysteriously disappeared, and Flinks took Pip to trail her kidnappers. Across the forests and swamps of the winged world called Moth, their only weapons were Pip's venom and Flinks's unusual talents. So yeah, I don't remember how I heard about this, but it just sounded really interesting, sort of a boy and his pet kind of thing, boy and his animal companion. Read a little bit of Alan Dean Foster here and there. He's pretty solid. Just sounds weird and interesting. Love that cover art. I believe this was expanded from a series of short stories, I believe. Maybe. I don't know. Like I said, I have a wish list on thrift books where I just add a bunch of vintage sci-fi. So I was just looking at that list and then picking whatever they had at the store that was on my list. And this was on there. So, yeah, sounds interesting. Sounds fun. We got a big boy here. Cities in Flight by James Blish. This is an omnibus of four novels. They Shall Have Stars, A Life for the Stars, Earthman Come Home, and The Triumph of Time. I don't remember much about this, but this is supposed to be like a big classic. I love James Blish. I've read a few of his novels. I read the omnibus The Devil's Day, and I loved it. And I've read a few short stories here and there, and I like his stuff a lot. So I'm really interested to check this out. It doesn't say much on the back. It says, "The epic cyclic history of the future is now brought together in one volume. In the tetralogy, James Blish has structured an entire universe in which mankind is no longer bound to the solar system, but has become both conqueror and victim of the stars." So yeah, it's a big, chunky boy, so very much looking forward to that. Hope that's good. And then for the final three here, these are more modern 90s, early 2000s era space operas that I've heard a lot about. Some were mentioned in the course. These are all mentioned in the course that I mentioned, but I've also heard a lot about them in the past. So I really wanted to get to check them out. These are all the first parts of series, but I just got the first books because, if I like them, then I can read more. First I have Light by M. John Harrison. This is the first novel in the Kefauchi Tract series. I've heard a lot about M. John Harrison. He wrote Viraconium, which I have a copy of, but I haven't read yet. But he's supposed to be very literate, very very experimental in terms of style. This sounded really wild. In contemporary London, a serial killer on the run slips into a future that doesn't yet exist, a quantum world he accesses through a breach of time and space. In this future, a woman has sacrificed her body to become one with her starship, pirating the galaxy while dodging the authorities who made her what she is. Here, too, a drifter and adventurer has gone deep and lived to tell about it. Barely. A man now addicted to the bizarre alternate realities and in debt to all the wrong people. Haunting each of them is the shadowy presence of the Shrander, and 3 enigmatic clues left on a barren asteroid under an ocean of light, a deserted spaceship, a pair of bone dice, and a human skeleton. So yeah, we'll see what that's like. It's supposed to be very weird, very strange. Sounds like a lot of fun. Next I have Revelation Space by Alastair Reynolds. This was his debut, and this became a part of its own series. I believe he's a Welsh-born author working out of the UK. This is one of the books that kind of kicked off the whole modern space opera genre. His books tend to be very big, very dense, very very much in the hard SF range. 900,000 years ago, something annihilated the Amarantan civilization just as it was on the verge of discovering spaceflight. Now one scientist, Dan Sylvestre, will stop at nothing to solve the Amarantan riddle before ancient history repeats itself. With no other resources at his disposal, Sylvestre forges a dangerous alliance with the cyborg crew of the starship Nostalgia for Infinity. But as he closes in on the secret, a killer closes in on him, because the Amarantan were destroyed for a reason, and if that reason is uncovered, the universe and reality itself could be irrevocably altered. So yeah, it's supposed to be very big, very, very, very crazy, lots of big ideas, which is one of the things I love about science fiction. And I've heard a lot about Alastair Reynolds, never read him, so yeah, there you go. Oh, and there's a blurb back here from Gary Wolfe, from the professor who was doing those lectures. Revelation Space delivers the goods, one of the most significant large-scale epics of the year. So yeah, looking forward to that. And then finally, another British author who writes these big, epic space opera-style stories. This is Pandora's Star by Peter F. Hamilton. This is the first book in the Commonwealth series, I believe. I believe it's a duology. The first book is Pandora's Star, and the second is, Judas Unchained. Don't know a whole lot about these. I just know that they're very big, very epic, very like big ideas, hard science fiction, big, crazy space opera stuff. The year is 2380. The intersolar Commonwealth, a sphere of stars, contains more than 600 worlds interconnected by a web of transport tunnels known as wormholes. At the farthest edge of the Commonwealth, astronomer Dudley Bowes observes the impossible. Over 1,000 light years away, a star disappears. Since the location is too distant to reach by wormhole, the Second Chance, a faster-than-light starship commanded by Wilson Kime, a 5 times rejuvenated ex-NASA pilot, is dispatched to learn what has occurred and whether it represents a threat. Opposed to the mission are the Guardians of Selfhood, led by Bradley Johansson. Shortly after the journey begins, Kime wonders if the crew of the Second Chance has been infiltrated, but soon enough he will have other worries. Halfway across the galaxy, something truly incredible is waiting, a deadly discovery whose unleashing will threaten to destroy the Commonwealth and humanity itself. So yeah, sounds interesting. Peter F. Hamilton is another author. He writes huge books. This book here is almost 1,000 pages, and I know some of his books are even longer than that, so I don't know when I'll get to this, but I do really want to. I very much look forward to that. So yeah, that was my sci-fi Christmas book haul. I hope you guys enjoyed. Have you read any of these books, any of these authors? If you have, let me know. Where would you recommend I start? And yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all that stuff. And until then, I'll see you guys later. Bye.